Is there any way to document your process of writing music other than the music itself?
I don't think so. How do you mean document it?
I mean, we're as documentarians,
Right.
We're really interested in process rather than final
finished thing.
product.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because we think, I don't know.
Well, we've been very interested, like in doing big ears and doing here the leading up to the performance, like that process and how people get ready and the exchanges between them. But we started to wonder about like songwriting itself. How would you document that? And so
Yeah, I don't know. You need to be with these people at the most kind of awkward and annoying phase of their day, probably. I would guess.
Well, let me ask, what is your process? Like, do you sit at a desk or?
Piano or clawing away at a string instrument like a viola or a cello in a very amateur fashion and just trying to hold the imagination together to imagine what it would sound like when it's when it's working, when it's played well. So I do that quite a lot, and I use software, and I use bits of this program called Max MSP to lots of maths and try and generate things with that. And I don't know, I'll use anything. I'm kind of shameless.
And is it like you block out like a month and you're like, I'm going to work on this, or is it?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I panic and think of things at the last minute, and they're often the best. And then I started thinking I can rely on that. And then when that doesn't work, you kind of realise you have to just sit and put the hours in, really. But you know, it's very rewarding. It's like writing classical stuff is a bit like a firework display, I think, because you have months and months of planning, and then just one afternoon to actually hear it, and then it's done, it's gone, and it's really interesting to have that kind of opposite to instant feedback. You don't have any feedback. You've got the one shot, and it's like the first rehearsal, the first run through is so exciting because you're looking through the score while they're playing, and you hear sections that work, sections that don't work, things that are better than you thought they were ever going to be, bits that you thought were going to just be great straight away, and they're awful, and you've got to cut them out, and it's all happening in the 15 minutes of the length of that piece of music. It's really interesting, you know. And with the band, it's the opposite. It's just, you know, you play it and you know what it's going to sound like, you know. So yeah, it's fun.
Do you write? I mean, is your process similar for Radiohead as for classical?
With Radiohead, there's usually a song that Tom's written or a chord sequence that I hope will go into one of Tom's songs, and it's it feels like arranging rather than anything else, you know, because there are chords and a melody, and it's how do you do an arrangement of that? That's what we find interesting, I think. You know, it's a very old-fashioned idea, really. It's a bit like, you know, you can buy 500 different versions of a Cole Porter song that's all been arranged in different ways for different jazz orchestras, and, you know, and sometimes I think we're more like that, you know. It's like, well, what technology do we use to do this song? And that technology can be anything, or you can try anything, you know, which is kind of indulgent, but certainly never works when we try and stick to, you know, anything too traditional in the rock world, I think.
Is the pleasure the same or similar or different, writing for the band or writing your own work for an orchestra?
The band stuff can be more exciting because the results come through much faster, and you have that sensation of thinking, this music didn't really exist last week, and now we've recorded it, and it's exciting, and it sounds like this, and it's promising, and so it's a much bigger hit. It's a faster fix, and orchestral stuff is more solitary and, and yeah, you get to ask yourself, what do you think you're doing a lot more often? But in the band, you're kind of busy with other people, and that's kind of nice.
I was struck, I was reading an interview with Colin, and I was struck by something he said, how he learned the bass because he wanted to play with the group. And it wasn't that he thinks of himself as a bass player.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that, I just love that idea of that, this wanting to make music with other people, and then you do that, you pick up the instrument to do that, not to become that player. I was wondering if you feel similarly, or you think of that idea.
I think what we were always telling each other as teenagers was, I wish I'd written that song, or I wish, I'd come up with that. It was never about being able to play like that. We never really had. I remember like early Radiohead interviews feeling like such an idiot, because when I was asked about favourite guitarists, I would usually have to ask the interviewer, who was the guitarist in Magazine again, and who played guitar in, because for me it was like they were anonymous and were just in my favourite band, and which is kind of disrespectful, but at the same time I think good bands, the musicians are sort of subservient to the band they're in. Did I tell you last time that story about the Pixies?
No.
We recorded our first record with Sean Slade and Paul Calderi, and they'd worked on some Pixies recording, and they were saying that the Pixies really deserve their success because they used to really rehearse, and they'd rehearse for days and days and days and days, and what they were rehearsing was how to write and arrange songs and them not be boring, and basically not bore the audience by making sure the songs were so short and so well arranged and interesting, and I never forgot that. I always thought that's kind of wild of the Pixies, is that they've rehearsed as a band to do something rather than rehearsing as a drummer to impress, and that's what I hope we're going to continue to be like.
That's kind of interesting, because as documentarians, we sort of don't believe in iconography.
Right.
And we're trying to figure out ways to do a different kind of documentary work and documenting something else that's going on besides that. And we feel that's kind of why we're involved in this project.
Okay.
And so I would be interested in knowing what sort of music documentaries you've enjoyed. Do any come to mind?
No, a lot of them are understandably played for laughs, and they are very amusing because it's such a ridiculous thing to do. But ones I've enjoyed, not really. No, I can't. Sorry, I can't think of any. I don't watch many.
We're kind of the same way.
Yeah. Okay.